The Texas health officials are monitoring a possible second Ebola patient and observing up to 18 others who came in close contact with the first person to be diagnosed with the virus in the United States. The patient, identified by media as Thomas Eric Duncan, had recently traveled from Liberia. He was only isolated 4 days after showing symptoms in Texas, raising questions about why doctors didn't immediately recognize his symptoms.
A case of apparent miscommunication with serious consequences. The first person diagnosed with Ebola in the U.S. went to a Texas hospital. He complained of Ebola-like symptoms and told the nurse he had recently traveled to Africa, factors that should have placed him in immediate isolation. But that information was not communicated to other staff, and he was sent home with just antibiotics. He was only isolated and formally diagnosed with Ebola 4 days later. By then, it's believed he came into close contact with 18 people, including children.
Today we learned that some school-age children have been identified as having had contact with the patient and are now being monitored at home for any signs of the disease.
Experts say the public should not panic, as Ebola is not spread through the air, but through close contact with bodily fluids.
This gentleman did not fly with any signs or symptoms of Ebola. He evidently was within the incubation period of the disease, had no signs and symptoms, and therefore was not infectious during the flight.
U.S. authorities insist they are prepared to deal with more possible cases of Ebola on home soil. But the early steps taken in Texas are a grim reminder of gaps in the medical system's preparedness to deal with Ebola spillover from West Africa.
And infectious diseases expert John Connor tells us that despite this apparent bungling, America is still well prepared to handle the Ebola threat.
There's always the risk that given modern travel, someone who's infected will show up in a foreign country and then show signs of disease. I think what is important here is addressing the fact that now that this person has been identified, how do you quarantine them? How do you do contact tracing? And I think that's what's actually been shown to be going very effectively. I think that the United States has been preparing for events like this for a while and thinking about how to deal with what happens when someone who has been infected shows up. How do you address this? How do you respond to this? I think the previous 4 cases that have been intentionally brought to the United States and successfully treated sort of highlights the ability of this country to contain and address people that have been infected.